Benvenuti a tutti, questo è il secondo appuntamento di presentazione delle attività di X.ITE. Come molti di voi sapranno, questo è un centro di ricerca che è neonato, tra virgolette, e si occupa di comportamenti e tecnologie per qualcosa che molti di voi vivono quotidianamente, anzi contribuiscono a realizzare. Cioè, questo continuo cambiamento delle frontiere nel management, nel marketing, ma anche nella vita dei cittadini, degli user di mezzi, qualunque sia la finalità, che è abilitato alle tecnologie. Al tempo stesso però le tecnologie ci consentono di capire meglio e più a fondo quello che fanno gli user, i consumatori e i cittadini in genere. Quindi, come dire, l'idea è che possiamo continuare a divertirci per molti anni ancora, perché grazie alle tecnologie possiamo fare ricerche sempre più approfondite, sempre più chirurgiche, e al tempo stesso però grazie alle tecnologie le sfide che ci troveremo ad affrontare saranno sempre nuove. Quindi, come dire, è una storia senza fine che, come sapete bene, ha accelerato molto negli ultimi anni, e diciamo, la relazione fra tecnologie e comportamenti individuali e sociali, di consumo e di fruizione dei media innanzitutto, ma non solo. Tutto questo sostanzialmente ci ha portato a fare un focus, un po' di massa critica e a lanciare questo centro di ricerca. Questa presentazione riguarda, come sapete, il social media ROI. Ce ne parlerà, lo presenterò fra 2 minuti, Davide Dubois, ma intanto che la nostra... Sì, no, la può cambiare, vado a braccio, tanto. La nostra attività, la presento rapidamente, è un'attività che si concentra su 4 aree. Un'area è la ricerca di base, quella che normalmente si fa all'università e che noi finanziamo attraverso operazioni di fundraising. Come chiediamo quattrini alle fondazioni, alle associazioni. Ci sono alcune associazioni vicine alla LUIS che diciamo per mission finanziano la ricerca, ma ci sono anche fondazioni bancarie, fondazioni filantropiche alle quali richiediamo dei quattrini per portare avanti le conoscenze e la ricerca. Poi abbiamo delle attività che facciamo in collaborazione con le imprese, sono delle attività su commessa vera e propria. Ovviamente non sono ricerche commerciali in senso stretto, ma sono ricerche che sono, come dire, in quell'area ibrida che è la ricerca che persegue delle finalità commerciali immediate e la ricerca che invece persegue delle finalità di incremento delle conoscenze, anche se non immediatamente spendibili a fini commerciali, ma che potenziano la capacità delle organizzazioni e delle imprese. E lo facciamo anche in via prioritaria, ma non esclusiva, con le istituzioni. L'abbiamo fatto con il CONI e con la Federazione Italiana Tennis, lo stiamo facendo con la Santa Sede, che come sapete negli ultimi mesi e soprattutto nell'ultimo anno si è resa protagonista di un cambiamento radicale nelle politiche e nelle tecnologie che vengono utilizzate per la comunicazione. Poi abbiamo un'altra area che è un ibrido, cioè a cavallo tra le ricerche istituzionali, quelle che facciamo con finanziamenti che hanno, come dire, una logica un po' filantropica, diciamo no profit, e l'area delle ricerche che facciamo per le singole imprese, che è l'area della membership. Cioè abbiamo creato una sorta di club a cui hanno aderito finora, sono 6 le imprese, ma abbiamo iniziato a raccogliere le adesioni da un mese, contiamo di arrivare a una decina almeno e a regime magari a 15-20 aziende, ma non di più, con le quali ci piacerebbe condividere i temi caldi su sempre il focus che è Consumer Behavior and Technology, e su questi temi caldi capire qual è la sensibilità delle imprese che fanno parte di questo club per poter indirizzare le nostre attività di ricerca, cioè fare una sorta di attività di ricerca di base, ma con la prospettiva della rilevanza nella percezione delle imprese, e per far questo abbiamo raccolto delle membership. All'interno di queste membership, oltre a questo confronto tra imprese, tra business community e academic community sui temi di ricerca rilevante, ecco, prevediamo la presentazione di seminar. Che succede? Ci siamo? Possiamo switchare direttamente sulla presentazione di David, dei seminari o dei talk, in funzione del taglio un po' più accademico o un po' più di esperienza aziendale o consulenziale o applicativa, da parte di colleghi di diverse business school, e in genere appunto per fortuna abbiamo una rete di relazioni accademiche internazionali abbastanza solida, che vanno appunto da INSEAD, a Wharton, a Columbia, a Kellogg, la Business School di Northwestern, che è considerata da sempre, come dire, l'alma mater for marketing scholars, no? Kellogg School since the beginning of last century, dagli inizi del Novecento considerata, mi rivolgevo a David Dubois perché lui ha preso il PhD a Kellogg ovviamente, quindi è considerata la madre delle scuole di marketing del mondo, e quindi di volta in volta invitiamo esponenti delle aziende o esponenti del club, della X.ITE member community a partecipare a questi eventi. Let me introduce David Dubois. David is, as you can see, is a young but very solid and well-reputed professor at INSEAD that everybody, I think, knows very well. And we are very happy to have David today here for many reasons. One is that David is part of the people we work with, doing research together and sharing research interest and also teaching experience. David is one of the professor of our elective courses at MBA level, and he's here as a short-term visiting professors. And also we are happy to have David here because David is the co-director of a very innovative program that INSEAD is offering at executive education level, that is the new Leading Digital Marketing Strategy program, starting next fall. Yeah. That's correct? For the first time is a program very innovative offered at INSEAD, and so he is the co-director, and together with this experience, we are happy to have David here because he wrote one of the most interesting and most popular business case on social media application, that is the L'Oreal case. And so he has a very good knowledge on the, let me say, the basic theory and social dynamics that, you know, nurture the social media conversations, because he worked on persuasion and influence, word of mouth diffusion, and of course has also a very good and strong and clear business perspective on that, since he worked looking from very close experience like L'Oreal and Accor Group in France. So thank you, David. Thank you to be here. I will attend your presentation, hoping that technology.
Well, I think we're going to.
Because there are some videos that are not easy to transfer.
Another 5 minutes, or we just start with the 2 minutes.
Yes.
3 minutes. All right. Maybe it's okay. Slowly moving. Sorry for the technological problems. It's always a bit annoying when you give a talk about about digital, and then you have the digital problems because suddenly you lose some credibility. But the things that we're going to talk about today are very different from like purely IT issues. So thank you very much for inviting me, Michele and Matteo, who is also in the audience. And thank you very much for all of you for coming here tonight. I'm very pleased to be with all of you and to share some of my thoughts and some of the things I've been working on around the idea of social but also digital ROI. Right. So of course it's a very big area when we talk about digital. And one of the things I'd like to discuss with you is to try to discuss what is digital around a few basic and hopefully simple ideas, so we see a little bit more clear with a bit of a better idea what's digital and how you can leverage it and how you can measure it and what are some of the do's and don't. And so of course it's I see this as an open conversation. So hopefully whenever you have questions, conversations. It's getting there. We're getting there. So hopefully, feel free to ask questions anytime. Repeat if my French accent is too French, because I know that it's not good. Everyone is okay listening to me, even those who are at the back. Yes, great. Okay. So now I think we're really very close. A few seconds. Yes. And thank everyone for their patience. And there we go. It's opening. Yes. Great. Okay. Now we know how to. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So let's see if we have. Great. Excellent. So again, thank you very much for sticking around, and sorry for the technological issues. I want to start by just reminding what's really the digital revolution about, and what is the major change that it has seen. And so some of you might be familiar with this picture. This is, a very famous city, a very famous Viale in Roma in 2005. Everyone is waiting for hearing the Pope's discourse. And so if you go 10 years after, same place, same type of people, this is the main change, right? So basically, when we talk about digital revolution, we talk about a change in the use and the ability of people to use technological devices that are changing the way they're communicating with one another, right? So it's very basic, but it has huge implication for when you think about the Pope's perspective. What's the Pope's message going to be? How it's going to be received, and the effectiveness of the message. So in this case, if we go back to 2005, we can imagine that the type of messages that are going to be broadcasted are going to be embedded much better in local culture. It's going to be mixed with different types of content. Maybe people will going to add music and so on. And so you see that it's going to be reflect on communication such that branding and communication excellence is even more important before in this situation, because the messages become so truncated and so so fractured. So if we go in a little bit more in details, what are these digital tools through which these disruptions take place? Well, they basically differ along two dimensions. The one is the extent to which they vary in audience, right? So you can think about tools that are one-to-one, one-to-several, one-to-many, one-to-everyone. And so that's basically how it started with social networks. I mean, everyone in the room is familiar with those, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and so on. And the idea was to connect with people with whom you share part of your identity. Could be your professional identity, could be your personal identity, and so on. Right? So that's one to a small group. And then, of course, it was not enough for people to share their interest and communications with a limited number of people. Some people wanted to reach the broader world, right? And they say, okay, I want to talk to the world. So if you want to talk to the world, you can speak to the world, but we ask you to be very short and succinct, and that's the 140 characters of Twitter, for instance. And of course, you have longer formats also, which are part of social media. Then you had another part of, or another set of social media, which didn't. They didn't want to vary the audience size. They say, why don't we specialize in a particular way of communication, right? And that was that led to the emergence of YouTube for videos, Instagram for images, and so on. And then you had yet another type of social media where they say, well, why don't we try to engineer some sort of interaction between the audience and the communicator. So content mills, for instance, are a website where a company or a brand is going to incentivize people to create content for free, right? And so that's where it's interesting for companies to get feedback about their product, but also to reach out to a greater audience. And then finally, there are games. We're not going to talk about them today, but they're part also of the big family of social media, right? So if you think about it very conceptually, it's a disruption in how people communicate with one another, either by distorting audience, one-to-many, or by changing fundamentally the way you're going to communicate on a very specific level. Could be video, images, and so on and so forth. And so what they have in common is that they disrupt social connectivity. And that's the reason why they're so important, because once you disrupt the way or the way people communicate with one another, you can move to the next level, which is you can disrupt the way people work together, right? There wouldn't have been Uber if there hadn't been a Facebook. There wouldn't have been an Airbnb if there hadn't been social media, right? So once the way people communicate is disrupted, then you can organize people in different groups to reach specific goals, and then you can create value out of it, right? So that's why it's very important to understand that it's the basis for what has been called the Uberization of the economy. With we're all familiar with Airbnb and so on. Just a very simple introduction. Now, when it comes to digital and social ROI, this is, I think, the most interesting study that I've seen in the area, where it's basically a function of two different momentum or perspective. Of course, you need, on the one hand, to have technological intensity, right? So you have to understand these tools, and you have to use them to the best of your ability. So it could be the use of social media, but if we go broader, it could be the use of mobile, the use of artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth, right? So this is technological intensity, the extent to which a company is using and leveraging technologies. And then the second aspect that a lot of companies are forgetting is to what extent these here, technologies, or this use of technologies, interact or are integrated into the overall strategy or vision of the company. Right? And so Capgemini was, and so this could be a vision, the coordination, could be the integration of social media into the daily practices of employees, and I'll talk about an example later. But you can see how it's only the combination of both that really makes digital worth it, and that brings return on investment. And so if you think about these two dimensions, you can start categorizing companies with their social media ROI in 4 different brackets. So you have here the companies who are not very interested in technology, and they're not really they don't have a clear vision, right? So they're what we could say beginners. Then you have companies who are conservatives. They have a clear vision for the company, but they don't really leverage social and digital technologies. So I work a little bit with luxury companies, for instance, and they would fall directly into this area. They have a clear strategy, they have a clear understanding vision, but they don't really care about digital and social, because digital and social are about connecting people, and luxury is about creating distance with your customers and creating a sense of uniqueness around your brands. Then you have a big group of people, big groups of companies who are fashionistas. This is the biggest group of companies who say, oh, social media, everyone is talking about social media, it's a big buzz, let's go and try and do something without having a clear vision. I work a lot with pharma companies, for instance. A lot of pharma companies fall into these categories because they realize there is potential. They have some strategic vision, but they don't push it to the next level and saying, okay, this is really what we need to do, and how do we align business goals with the technology? And then, of course, you have the digital experts, who are very few, who know how to integrate strategy and technology together. And so what's interesting is when you look at ROI, it's only the combination of both that really lead to higher revenues, profitability, and market valuation. So this is, again, a study that was done by Capgemini and MIT. Again, so you could look at, when we looked at these 4 types of companies, you can see that it varies. So the digitality, or those who are really technologically advanced, of course, it's going to be very high in high tech. It's going to be very high in banking because it's under a lot of disruption and competitiveness. But as you move to more like B2B settings, for instance, or pharma, you're going to see that there are less and less initiatives, right? So there's a distribution by industry. And what's really interesting, so you can see, okay, different industries. So pharmaceutical would be more, on the beginner side with manufacturing, but they're a bit more, fashionistas than the B2B. Then you have insurance, and of course high tech, who are both doing strategic integration and they know how to use technology. And so what's interesting is, when you look at revenue generation, it's only, again, a combination. So when you look at revenue generation, it's only when you have a clear integration of technology, that it's going to lead to an increase in revenue, right? If you do technology alone without integration, it's not going to work. Right? Same thing for profit generation. Again, the only the biggest margin in terms of value creation is in those companies here, which is plus 26%, which are both very good at creating value through strategic integration, and also who know how to leverage their technology. Same thing for market valuation, and it's even broader. Make sense? Any questions so far? No? It's just very, very basic, but it's better so that we're all on the same page. So now the problem of ROI, and particularly of social media ROI, is the problem of attribution, right? So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this attribution, but if we look, for instance, as a customer, this customer is looking for luxury shoes. There are many touch points that are going to appear in social media, but also in search, right? And you don't know to what extent whenever you're doing, when you're putting an ad, or you're doing SEO, search engine optimization, or whether you're creating a Facebook, to what extent it's going to affect the final decision of your customer buying the information, right? So again, it could be search for, so the first step will be search for luxury shoes. Maybe he's going to see an advertising for Louboutin, the famous luxury shoemaker, a heel maker. Then he's going to search for it. Then he's going to search for competitors. Then he's going to, this is not working. Then he's going to search for e-commerce options for Louboutin. Then he's going to go to social media, and he's going to say, aha, oops, what is that? Okay, let me see. There was a bit. Okay, then he's going to go to, well, it's easier like this. Then he's going to go to Facebook page. Then he's going to search for e-commerce. Then he's going to go to the website, and maybe he's going to buy there, and he's going to tweet about it, and that's going to be earn content, right? So he's going to yield advertising on behalf of for the brand, and finally he's going to search for future products. And so the big question is, how can we attribute the value of the final purchase to each of these steps? And the answer is, we don't know. So I'm not going to bring tonight the magic answer. The only thing I can do is I can say, at least you can classify this type of different behaviors as a function of how close they are to the actual business. And so this is the slide that you already saw, okay, which is going to happen here. Which I've used several times, where I say, well, there are actually 3 steps to measuring ROI. The first one is to look at a level of activity. Is there something happening or not? Right? And so the second one is engagement. So above and beyond activity, are you going to find people actively engaged, actively working for you, for your brand? And finally, we're moving out of from the online world, and we're looking at offline behaviors. To what extent, or actual business KPIs, to what extent there's going to be a creation, a piece of advertising that is going to come from customers, user-generated content, and increase your brand value. Okay? So I'll give you a few examples. So activity just means something is happening. Okay? And at the operational level, you can think of as a number of page views, traffic, number of likes, number of membership if you have a group on the internet. At the conceptual level, we look at the unique reach, right? How many people you reach. Now, it doesn't mean that if you reach a lot of people, that they're all going to buy your product, right? So you have to go one step beyond, and you have to say, okay, what's the engagement? And so that can conceptually be linked to customer attention, customer involvement, and customer commitment. And so from an operational standpoint, you can look at variables like how much time was spent on your website, which is typically a measure of involvement. Number of comments, number of IDs submitted, for instance, if you do a contest. Conceptually, it refers to, in the old marketing, to notions of awareness, purchase intent, brand association, where you see different differences and increases in more favorable brand associations. And finally, the business one, which is actually, in fact, the most important one, is the one where you actually see a return on the business, right? And so that's where operationally, it could be if you have a contest, for instance, and ask people to generate IDs, it could be measured by the number of IDs implemented, right? It could be either the number of sales or, and we're going to come back to that, the cost savings, right? So sometimes with social and digital, it's not a matter of increasing sales, but it's a matter of knowing your customers better. It's a matter of knowing that such and such products are going to do better in specific geographies. And that's in the domain of you avoid money loss, you avoid cost. You don't necessarily earn more money, but they're still very important and need to be quantified. And conceptually, it aligns with concepts like trial, conversion, and actual consumption. So now I want to move to really 3 misconceptions and really move away people, companies, and businesses from accurately understanding what social media is and accurately assessing social media ROI. And the first one, and it's very difficult for a lot of people, is to say, when you're on social media, let's say you have 1 million likes. It doesn't mean that you own your audience. Conceptually, it's very different from buying media on TV, for instance. We have friends from an agency here, and they know this better than anyone else. It's going to be very, very different from owning, your 5-minute share. And very often, there's a disconnect between senior management and younger employees as to this very specific issue. That senior management typically, still views like the big end, having the big end as being the holy grail. Which, in fact, you have to realize that these customers are actually making a step towards you, but it doesn't mean they love you and they're going to buy. So you have to look at what you do with these customers to create meaningful ROI. And so, so for instance, again, if we look at three great brands, Dior, Gucci, and Armani, you could say, Armani has 12 million likes versus 7 and 7 for the 2 others, so Armani is the big winner. But if you go into number of comments, for instance, you can look and you can say that if you look at the ratio, you could look at you realize that actually the one that generates most comments based on likes is Gucci. And so these customers are much more engaged. Now, remember, it's the second step, right? It doesn't mean that they're still going to buy more shirts or Gucci products, but at least you go a little bit beyond this like big N, right? And the big question, the big realization is to say that the audience shouldn't be about the N, the audience should be about what you do with it. So this is a great example I love. Some of you may be familiar because essentially what they do here is they think about themselves as a media publisher, okay? Before the world of social and digital, the way to think about the organization of the world essentially was that you had companies which main point was to produce. You had the media, which main point was to broadcast the products that the companies were creating, and you had consumers, which main function was to consume. And what social media has done is it has broken the monopoly of the media such that now everyone, companies, but also consumers, can rise and become, if they know how to create content, curate content, and disseminate content, they can become much more recognized and bring value attached to them, right? That's why you've seen the rise of the influencers, but also the rise of companies that are doing this very well, like Nike, you'll see L'Oreal later. And so this is exactly the story. So Willy Blend is a very small, let me see if I can get this straight, okay? Very small company. And so what they did was, So it was founded by a person called Tom Dixon in the US, a very small company, about 200 people from Utah. And they were manufacturing very good blenders, but these blenders had low awareness. And so his challenge was, how can we make the blenders more known and ultimately ramp up sales? And so what they did is he realized that, broken triangle, which I just described, and he said, why don't I hire a guy who have these media skills? So he had a background in publishing and whatever as a new marketing director. And what he did is he arrived to the company and spent a few days to try to look at the environment, what it was like, and so on. And after a few days, he decided to, he realized that there was a very strange process happening every day, which was Tom Dixon and some of the engineers were blending planks of wood to test the robustness of the blenders, right? And that's where there's a big disconnect in perspective. Because from the people in the company, it was, what they were doing in the breakfast, I blend planks of wood. From everyone outside, in the perspective, it was something absolutely new. And so he decided to start creating a series of videos that would portray Blendtec as the publisher of fun news around blending. And so we're just going to watch a short excerpt so you just realize what I'm talking about, if this works.
Will it blend? That is the question. Now we're going to do something kind of unique here. Here I have a dozen light sticks, and these are break and shake light sticks that last for 12 hours. Now it says on the instructions, do not puncture, cut, or bite in the light stick. Now it doesn't say don't blend the light stick. Let's turn the lights off for effect. That is a 12-hour lantern.
Okay, so you have one. This is another one. I just want to show you. Let's see if
These are bad balls.
So he does the same with golf balls.
Tough times.
And you understand that the golf balls are, have the same fate as the other guys. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because, this is clearly a publisher's approach. Right? So you see that it's very similar to having your own show. The stage is the same, the music is the same, the guy, the presenter is the same. It's funny, you have brand awareness with the image of the brand on the blender, on the Blendtec at all points. And you see that he starts creating a program, a content of program, rather than a one-shot video. Right? And that publishing approach was very rewarding because, let's see if I can get that right.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Italian. I need to work on my Italian, obviously. And so, one of the results of this video is I'm going to show you is through Google search. So very successful approach. The first year, their sales was increased by more than 700%. They also ramped a number of, they increased the number of followers on different platforms, including YouTube. And what they did with it is they also tried to encourage people to post comments, to post ideas for picture for your blending stuff. So you want to blend, the next iPad, the next iPhone, my former teddy bear, whatever. One way to measure this is through Google Trends, which reflects essentially the interest in search for Blendtec. Right? So it's a very crude measure, but it turns out that it's based on millions of data. Whenever you search for something, it goes to Google Trends. It's actually a free tool, and it allows to check very quickly whether something is rising, whether something is decreasing. So what you can see here is that it's not important that there was one viral video, but it's important that there was a collection of videos that provided a sustainable success for the company, right? The means of the viral video is like, okay, everyone looks at the video, then no one reads the video anymore. Is not, it's very different from this, which is the success, getting a sustainable success through social media. That makes sense? You with me? Yeah? All right. This is another project that we worked on, where this is about a milk producer who had to recall milk from different countries. Okay? And so, why? Because they found that there was a bacteria that caused botulism and so on. So the question is this going to affect only milk products or products that also use milk like cheese and so on? And another way to look at Google search is to say, well, when people searching for one product, do they also search for different associations or just for that product? And what we find here is, indeed there is a problem with milk, big spike, but there's no spike with the two other milk-related products. So what this means is, there's no contamination. And so just another way to think about search as a measure, as a proxy for ROI when you don't have the actual sample. So that was the first misconception really is it's not the number that matters, it's really the engagement. The second misconception I want to talk about is that very often companies, brands alike, think that social media can help them to get more. Right? So more products, more customers, and so on. But there is also a lot of value into listening to customers, and that's something I've been very interested in the last few years. As long as you know how to integrate the insights into your brand strategy, and so for instance, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but digital data can come from many sources. This is a representation of some people know Manhattan. So we are here, we have a picture of Manhattan, and we have some green dots and red dots. And the red dots represent the users of? Oh? No? Okay, no. There's no bold move or, no, it's adventurous, come on. Mobile phone, but which ones? Apple. Apple, yes, bravo. So the red ones are the Apple users. The green ones are the Android users, and then you have also the dying tribe of those who are purple, who are the BlackBerry users here in the middle of Manhattan. I don't know whether you see them, but they're here, right? And what's amazing about this data, for instance, again, this is a kind of a check, but this data really mirrors differences in social economic status, of course, with red areas being wealthier. Why? Because Apple is a luxury product, considered as a luxury product, and therefore more likely to be accustomed to be adopted in these areas as well. So that's one example of digital data. You can also, this is a number of, this is the Twitter data, of course, with a different color per country. You can think about the search data that I just mentioned as well. This is an example by Google Flu. I don't know how many of you have heard about it, but what they did was they wanted to predict the flu by looking at the search words associated with symptoms of the flu. So what you do when you have the flu, you start having the fever, you don't feel good, and you start Googling for anti-fever type of things. Right? And so what they did is, the model is not perfect, but they created a solution that would relatively be good at predicting flu epidemics from one year to another. You can also think about retail and how when you integrate technology, it's not just for fun, it's because you actually really want to learn from your customers. So this is a great brand, which I encourage you to go and see the website. It's called Rebecca Minkoff. It's a brand based in New York entirely digitalize their retail store, which really helps them to get analytics data about where are people in the store, what are the point of comparisons, whether they want the shirt and so on. Very, very interesting case. Of course, you have the data from connected items, and pharma companies are using this more and more as a way to get patient data, as a way to get data from HCPs, for instance, to try to better understand the behaviors of those who are in your business ecosystem. Okay. And so this is just an example of that I had the pleasure to work on L'Oreal, and how a fashion company can apply this kind of technique, which I call creating a value loop. And so this was in 2011. They were looking for creating a new product. And as many of you know, in the fashion industry, there are a lot of things that become fashionable, but you don't know what's going to be a trend from what's going to be a fad. Okay? And so at that time, you had three particular trends. Ombre, where it's about dyeing your hair with lighter colors. You start from dark and you follow in lighter colors. Tie-dye, which is a bit more complex, and splat hair. This is an extreme version of splat hair. Essentially, you work your hair horizontally as opposed to working your hair vertically. And the question was, well, to what extent, what's going to be the trend we're going to use when creating when creating our new product, right? And so now we have a number of questions that, as a brand, we have to ask. Right? First question is, what's the market potential for each of the three trends? Maybe one is better than the other. Second one is, okay, if there is a market potential, what area are we going to start with? Are we going to start with Italy, or are we going to start with Spain, France, and so on and so forth? Then we also need to think about, as L'Oreal, what value we create. And what's going to be the brand name, what's going to be our positioning, and so on. And also, what's the know-how, right? And that's where you can start seeing that the know-how will actually be with the hairdressers, right? So you probably want to listen to them as well, engage in some sort of discussion. And you see that some of them are quantitative, these questions. Some of them will require analysis of post videos that are user-generated content. So just to give you an example of what they did, they first started with very basic search with Google search. And what you see here is the only one which is rising in terms of trends is the red line. Right? This is ombre. The two others, which are splat hair and tie-dye combined, remain very flat. Now, if you zoom out on this blue line, you see here that there was some sort of trend for the last two, but they're only seasonal. Now, this is very small, but I tell you, this is July and August. Right? It makes sense that, you know, during the summer, you want to dye your hair crazy in red or in green, and that's not going, you know, once you're back at work, your boss is probably not going to be happy if you still have green hair. So it doesn't mean that there's no potential, by the way, but it means that there's a potential for a seasonal product rolled out every summer or every some cyclical interval. However, for mass product of L'Oreal, we are going to go with ombre. Now we can check with additional levels of granularity whether ombre is really going to be a solution. So we can look, for instance, by language. Different languages will have different words for this ombre. Right? So for instance, in Spanish, it will be mechas californianas. In Italian, it's going to be lo sfumato. In French, we're going to put an accent because we like accents in everything. And so what you can see is, you know, if you compare it to baseline, there is some increase. Right? Of course, it went much further after, but that's because of what L'Oreal did. Right? But compared to baseline, you can see that there is some sort of increase. And so these give you some confidence that yes, there's something happening with ombre, not with the others. And so then the question is, okay, but what do we do in terms of getting the brand right? And so that's where I want to show you a short excerpt of user-generated content to show you what you could find if you engage in these kind of things. And so let's see if we have this. So I'm not going to show you everything because it lasts for 14 minutes. There are two young girls. But you see that they're here. And because there's no product, they use a combination of different products. Okay? So you see that they first mix something together. They have a bowl. It seems quite complex. They have aluminum here, okay, with the scissors. Okay, look at what they're using here. Do you look at what you see what they're using? They're using a toothbrush. For those who are parents, this is what your kids are doing at home when you're at work. And this is what your toothbrush sometimes doesn't smell very good. So they do the toothbrush, then they do this, you know, they continue, they create some sort of aluminum thing, blah, 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 and we're good. Okay, 14 minutes video. What have we learned from it? Are these people motivated? Yes, they are motivated. Okay. What's going to be the positioning for L'Oréal? Did it seem easy or complex? It's going to be it's complex, so we're going to make it easy. Okay? We also, through this new technique, we've understood the term that people use for their brand. So how are we going to call our brand? What was the name of the trend? Ombre. We're going to use ombre as part of the trend because it's no more top-down branding, it's bottom-up generation of value. And so, you know, then the question becomes, you know, what's your decision chain? What are the decisions in which you need to integrate these insights and how you're going to integrate it? So, for instance, here, market analysis, branding, positioning, new product development, promotion. And we listen to consumers, we listen to competitors to see whether there are alternative products, to potential collaborators, to the context, how the media is portraying these different trends. And so what we do is, yes, you know, we found out that there's market potential for ombre. The brand name is going to be something about ombre. The positioning is going to be about simplicity and easiness because it's very difficult. New product development, we know, remember the toothbrush, that we don't want our kids to use the toothbrush, so we're going to get something a brush, right? We're going to create a package. And for promotion, we know that these girls are very interesting, so we're going to be able to try to design an influencer program, and maybe the first two girls we're going to send the package to are going to be these two, right? Because they might react very, very positively. So that's exactly what they did. So I can quickly show you the ad.
Dip dye into Wild Ombre, the easy trend to blend. New preference Wild Ombre from L'Oréal. Its formula blends perfectly for a graduated lightning effect. The brush, so easy to use. Start from 2/3 down and brush towards the tips. Whatever your hairstyle. Wild Ombre, our first dip dye kit from Preference by L'Oréal Paris.
Okay, so what's the brand name? Wild Ombre. So ombre, you know, it's always very tricky to capture a name that has had some organic value. And you might be seen as being stealing what customers are coming up with. So it's wild ombre. It's also a younger target. Right? You've seen the brush, of course. You've seen the simplicity. You've seen and I could go on and on. This is a short version, so you can see again. The goal is really to think about these value loops, how you integrate these insights into the decision making that you're doing to create value. And you can see in terms of social media ROI, and then it becomes much more difficult to say, well, you know, like we increase the value just because we were on social media. We increase the value because we also listen to social media. So there's a value in pulling, there is a value in pushing, and there's a value, the biggest source of value that companies tend to forget is it's really into the integration. And that's where, you know, the role of agencies and intermediaries can really help. Again, you know, the notion being you to integrate, pull, to listen, integrate, and push back. And so, you know, that's another video I wanted to show you. When you have this type of strategy, then you see that the type of advertising that you're going to get, free promotion, earned media, is going to be very different from what used to exist. So this is, for instance, an example of one of the influencers that L'Oréal worked with, and so I'm not going to show you everything because, you know, it lasts for a while, but you're going to see that, you know, there's a music in the background. The video is much more polished, even though it's not professional per se. Okay, and says Luna, hello, blah 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 blah. So you see that at some point she shows the product. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah. So that was it. You can see a few things. One is that the quality is much better, right? But it's still not fully professional. The other thing is that it has some elements of traditional advertising, the before-after. I show my product in the middle of the video. But it also has all the features of a classic user-generated content. And you see how advertising is moving at a very fast pace from traditional advertising with our 30-second video and for Super Bowl to this kind of advertising, which, by the way, I think this was 300,000 views or something, and they got several millions, if not dozens of millions of views through earned media, which is much more effective because also, you know, you trust other people much more than companies, and these messages come from other people. So, first, you know, be scared of big N. Second, think about the value in terms of ROI, not only in the value of push, but also the value of pull. Third, social media is not is social media about entertainment? No, it's not about entertainment. And whenever you think about advertising, you always have to think about, you know, these two goals that are very that are overlapping but yet distinct. Right? You have one goal which is persuasion, classic. Marketing always had that. We're doing marketing because we want to persuade someone either to change our attitudes, buy our products, be part of our community. And then you also have the goal of virality. Right? The goal of virality is, if you look at, you know, the behavior that you want to create, is very different. Here, you want at the end to have a higher attitude toward your product. Here, you want people to spread your product, to spread word of mouth about your product. So very different outcomes, and you could build a piece of content which is very good at that, is very poor at that, or vice versa. And you need to hit the sweet spot between these two if you want to really be successful. And so, again, when you think about persuasion, you want to increase intentions, actions. It needs to be aligned with strategy, brand focused, and it's focused on the content utility. That you want to maximize the utility of your content. When it's virality, it's about the reach. That's the only metric that matters. Aligned with viewers, narrative focus, and here what you want to maximize is social utility. You want to maximize the fact that other people are going to watch the video too. And so, what's interesting is this is the only piece of research, which is not from me, but from a very esteemed colleague at MIT. These two things are actually disconnected. So we had this researcher, her name is Kate Tucker. What she did is she took a series of ads. Some of them were shared 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 views. And then she asked independent respondents to rate them on some measure of purchase intention. Would you like this? Would you like to buy this product, and so on? And what she found was actually a slight negative correlation, which means that the more your video is viral, the less it's going to be impacted in terms of, the less it's going to be effective at driving interest and sales. Now, it's not always the case, and I don't want to mix your brain here, but this is something that you have to realize and keep in mind. It makes sense because, in fact, a lot of companies are going to increase their virality by adding a cat or a baby and a cat, or any combination of, hey, you have a great virality, but then your brand is going to be destroyed. As to be compared with blend tech, where the main point of differentiation was I buy the blend tech because I want to blend. And I build my virality around by blending fun stuff and so on. But the blender is always at the center, right? And that's really important. And so I think that what we did is, focusing again only on this part and not a combination of both, but we looked at the number of videos that have been very successful at becoming viral, and we looked at the dimensions that make a video more likely to be spread. And so these are the different dimension is social utility. Is the video useful socially? Is it going to help my social presence? Is it going to be useful to others? Why would I share this content? The second one is things that are provocative tend to spread further. Right? I mean, you have to know your boundaries with provocativeness, but a little bit of provocativeness helps. Things that are replicable. Right? So think about the Blendtec example. Think about building a collection of videos or incentivizing people to create videos that are like yours rather than having this one video that's going to give you these 200 million likes, because that's a myth, that's very unlikely, and it's not clear that it's linked to greater ROI. Emotional, to what extent the execution contains emotion? There's lots of research in brain imagery and neuroscience, which looks at really the link between emotion and your likelihood to click share, to click, to spread the word with other content. Then ambiguous, because videos that are ambiguous, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, hey, is this true or is this not true? Right? So it's going to increase your likelihood to get this. And then finally, and this is particularly true for those of you who are interested in apps and app development, it's about distributiveness. So to what extent you have built, a lot of apps, for instance, are great from a technological standpoint, but then there is no mechanism for sharing it with one another, right? As opposed to, for instance, some of you might remember the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? Whereas the thing, you have a piece of content, you do it or not, and then you have to nominate 3 people, right? So there is a mechanism for being shared, which is embedded in the content, right? Which makes it automatic. It's all like the world. The first very successful messaging system, like Hotmail, was doing the same. They would, at the end of your signature, when you send email, they would include, this is a proud maker of whatever Hotmail, so use Hotmail, right? So it's not anything new, but again, think about the spread, and think about also the spread framework. Think also about this balance between virality and effectiveness, right? It's not always good to maximize virality. And so again, if we look at this, this was effective because one, it has a high social utility. You share about the disease. It's slightly provocative in the execution. It's replicable because everyone makes one about it. It's slightly emotional as well because both you see the facial expression, but it's also a very serious disease. It's ambiguous because you don't really know what it's about, except if you're directly touched by it. And it's distributed because of the mechanism, right? So again, one example, but you get the picture. So again, 3 big misconceptions. One, I own my audience. No, I don't own my audience. The value comes from engagement. Second, social media primarily helps me to get customers. No, the value comes as much from the data you get from these customers, the insights you get, as from what you push towards them. And social media is not about entertainment. Social media, ROI, successful social media, is about this balance between virality and effectiveness. Okay? And so, of course, so what you could do, you could move from, I wrote an article, I'm happy to share it later, which was about how you need to, for the first point, to move from positional to relational metrics. So it's not a matter of whether you have 1 million likes, 2 million likes, 3 million likes, but how much the relationship that you have or the relationship between your customers matter. Social media, so here, for the second point, I think it's very important for ROI to not only recognize the value added, but also the cost saving in terms of, your customers better, so you have to invest in advertising research less. You have to, you can learn also what products work better or not. So you decrease your cost in R&D and so on. You have to identify these different areas in which you can avoid creating money, and you have to quantify that, because that's also part of the ROI. And then, of course, social media is about, not entertainment. You can use the spread framework as a kind of very quick way to check whether this is much more likely to use or not. Now, I I want to finish with something more for those of you who are on the company side, which is that it's also very important when thinking about ROI to that the company embrace these new metrics and these new ways of doing things. And so I'm working right now on a very interesting or case that I find interesting about Accor, where it's a very Accor is a very big hoteling group based in France, and it's an industry that has been disrupted in many ways. You've got the online travel agencies being increasing both in terms of size and eating margins, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, and so on. The rise of new actors like Airbnb and others that have also taken some part of the market. And the question for big groups like Accor is, what do we do and how do we respond? And the first thing that they have started to do, that's not working. First thing they have started to do is they've looked at their e-reputation by hotel. And so they've integrated the social media listing aspect, which I just mentioned, such that now every hotel measures its e-reputation vis-a-vis close competitors. So for instance, Sofitel Rome is going to monitor the 5 or 6 other luxury hotels in Rome and have an e-reputation score. And this e-reputation score, and this is the most interesting part, is going to be integrated into the organizational design and in the incentive structure of the company. So now the whole hotel management incentives is going to partly be based on whether this e-reputation score goes up or down. The very basic version is, I go to Sofitel Rome, I don't like my bed, I go to Facebook, I complain about it, suddenly the e-reputation score of Sofitel goes down by 85, which is going to negatively impact the level of incentives that we're going to receive. So everyone now is incentivized to do well, to respond on social media, and to make sure that they're on top of what they offer. And so in terms of ROI, you've seen that they moved from like the 2000 where they had feedback cards, how you would write yes, you're satisfied or on a card, from net promoter scores and also e-reputation scores. Now that is automatically computed, and that goes back as a feedback loop to customers to improve that the level of service arguments and that Accor manages to the best of the ability this digital disruption. So I'm happy to stop, but I'm happy to take questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me say that personally I found a lot of very insightful examples and ideas, and also what maybe we need more in the last at least 10 years, that is theorizing behind this new phenomenon, because this is the real challenge for academics, but I think that could be also the biggest support we can try to offer to people working and testing innovation, so the real innovators that are on the field. So and this is very interesting because let me start with one idea about what you said, that maybe we have to accept the challenge that is to try to radically innovate the way we measure. We need new metrics. If you ask me what kind of metrics, I really don't know exactly the specific metric, but I am very now reinforced in my idea that social media can generate not only new way to measure old metrics, but also really new metrics on two specific areas. One is exactly the last one. You talked about this organizational learning. Everybody knows that thanks to new media and digital media, we can learn from customers. But how many companies are using new metrics in order to understand how much more they are learning than their competitors using specific media? Because we have to reallocate the budget, of course. But reallocating budget from conventional media to new media is something that can be done with old tools. From newspaper to radio, from radio to television, through television to Google Ads, from Google Ads to Facebook, from Facebook to blah, blah, blah. Okay, we can use allocation and reallocation, experimental models, learning how the curve is changing, the feedback on conventional media. But are we measuring in new way the learning of the organization, the learning on the touch point, on the interaction, then service encounters are traditional key performance indicators, on the learning in general? How much better I'm innovating thanks to social media than conventional, and how much more effective is this process? So this is a new area that is very insightful, was at least for me very insightful in your presentation. Of course, as very often happen, when you have an insight, you don't have the answer. But at least if you see the problem, it's, you are on the track. And the second one is exactly the idea that you are working on, because I know you are working very hard on persuasion, influence, social influence, and so on, is how to measure the earned communication contribution to the conventional performance measurement. How much the social sharing is accelerating the buying intention, the purchasing intention, or the sales. So it's something that in the past was very difficult, even to imagine you can measure. But that now, maybe we can try to, to approximate with some intermediate measure. It is possible, let me say, to understand how much the Twitter we exchanged or the WhatsApp I exchanged with my wife can affect my buying behavior. Sorry for being very naive in the example I did, but this is there are a lot of earned media. All right, we can know we save investments, but how much more we are gaining from this earned media is something we have to explore, I guess. Sorry for, these are two areas very, very insightful in your presentation.
I think it's a great points, and I think the first point is very important, which is how do you identify the new source of values, and that's something that I really focus on. I think when I talk about opportunities for companies to create new values about people using their products and services, right? So one of the examples I use, for instance, is Nike Plus, as the shoemaker who decided to create a community, and the community now is recording. It was the first one, very innovative. Now a lot of companies are doing the same thing. Now you've got a bunch of connected items. IoT is specifically in these, but the point of IoT is really how can I create new value, new learnings for the company that might then transform into additional values. Could be not for your customers, it could be for someone else in the ecosystem. Could be, so again, in healthcare companies, some of the apps are aimed at learning about HCP's behavior, right? Why do they prescribe such medicine? Why not this medicine? What sources do they use, and so on? These are very amazing, very important questions. Or treatment adherence. To what extent diabetes are adhere to a certain treatment? To what extent they fail to do that, and how could we improve their things? So it's all about creating your own value loop, creating your own source of data that then you have to identify how to sell to different actors in the ecosystem, and sometimes reinvent yourself, because now you've become a platform where the data, you own the data, and the data is your richness, and so you have to now connect the platform to different ships or different partners which are going to help you to create money. So that's the first one. Second question is also a $1 million question of multi-attribution and models and so on. It's a great question. I don't have specific answers, but I think it's
answer should share.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But absolutely, it's a $1 million question. A lot of people in our field, at least in marketing, are interested in that, and we're making slow progress because, of course, there's a bunch of different perspectives and dimensions to consider, but it's a work in progress. So Any other questions? I think we can open to the floor.
Let me try to. It's not really a question, no? It's a consideration about what you just tell about social media, Roy, about the topics today. Maybe the biggest challenge is to find a different path or different track to recognize the right measurement of a social media ROI, because you talk about different approaches, different goals. It's not only a marketing goals, because when you talk about R&D, to cut the cost of R&D, is also coming from the right usage of social media to drive, to cut the cost of R&D, for instance, or you talk about the way to use social media as an incentive to evaluate HR. So maybe this is the biggest challenge, no? To find a way to different
company stakeholders.
Yeah, this is
Absolutely, no, I think it's a great question, and I think again, you know, it goes back to, if you remember the kind of two-axis matrix, you know, that I started the talk with. We're really talking about the strategic integration. This path is company specific. So the business goals for Accor would be different from business goals for Hyatt or some other company. And so you've got what's a bit more difficult is the value of a like, for instance, you know, to make it very simple, will be different across industries, right? And so the idea that before in the world pre-social media, we all had metrics, and you know, they were kind of common. You know, we had attitude scales and purchase intentions and so on. The idea that we're going to recreate that for entire industries, I think is a bit. I mean, it's great and ambitious, but I think it's, you know, every company or every at least industry should really start thinking about business, you know, specific outcomes that can be measured by social media metrics. That's my intuition.
More questions?
Or you're all hungry and ready for dinner.
Aperitivo.
Aperitivo, yeah, of course.
It's too early for that. It's not like in Barcelona, but you know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good, thank you very much.